The Department of Justice has approved T-Mobile's takeover of rival Sprint.
Now, I don't get to say this very often, but this is a deal that has been 5 years in the works.
The will they or won't they question, it's been answered.
T-Mobile and Sprint are merging.
It's a deal valued at $26.5 billion, combining two of the four biggest wireless carriers.
The thing about T-Mobile and Sprint is that they really helped transform the wireless industry.
Sprint represents an amazing family of a hardworking group of people who never gave up, who were resilient, and who are resilient today. And I think that is the essence, is the foundation of this company.
With the resilience of the people that are here and the fight, myself included, we're not done. The last chapter's not written yet, and we're not ready to write it.
I think it's going to be a new era because we won't be called Sprint. If there's something I'm sad about, is that the name Sprint would be going away.
The ideas, the people, the innovation hopefully continues on in a new company. But that's life. That's fine. That's the way it should be.
For over 100 years, this company has been in existence, and it's had different names. It's had different taglines. It's had different colors of how it was expressed in the marketplace. But the culture and the spirit of the people that have continued to work here year after year after year, that doesn't go away.
The story of Sprint goes way back. In the late 1800s, as the Bell Company's original patents on the telephone were expiring, a young entrepreneur named Clayson Brown had an idea to serve small towns, like his own small town of Abilene, Kansas, with service that the Bell Companies didn't provide. That idea turned into a regional operation called the Brown Telephone Company.
At the time, the Bell system controlled probably the high 90% of the market. And so we here had this giant company and this relatively small rural telephone company. How are you going to compete? How are you going to do it?
So when you look back at Clayson Brown and the way that he grew Brown Telephone, you realize that mergers and consolidations are really a part of this company's DNA from the very beginning. So Brown Telephone became United Telephone and Electric. It went bankrupt because of the challenges the industry had during the Great Depression. But the company made a comeback as United Utilities. With changing times comes changing leadership. And so Clayson Brown was followed as CEO by Alden Hart, and Hart was followed by Carl Skupin. Both of those guys were big forward thinkers. And it was Skupin who hired the guy who really brought us into the modern age, Paul Henson. He took innovation and growth to an entirely new level.
More than 3,000 communities in 20 states. Families, businesses, and institutions all depend on United Telephone System to meet their diverse communications needs. The United Telephone System, a clear and distinct voice in the information age.
Henson had the goal of serving 2 million telephones in 6 years, and he did it in 4.
Mr. Hanson, please, long distance calling.
He took this company from being a small Midwestern company to a U.S. company with a real vision. He always wanted to be a leader in technology, so he was always looking for what the next thing would be.
The communications business is expanding in hundreds of different and exciting ways. We are expanding with it. The concept of transmitting signals over wires is already obsolete. Microwave, satellites, community antenna television systems, these are the vehicles of the future.
Our distribution business is expanding at home and abroad, and our computer group is one of the top 10 in remote computing service.
In 1983 to 85, we started into long distance.
I know it sounds very archaic these days, but we needed to move beyond being able to make local telephone calls to being able to call our friends, family, and loved ones across the country for a reasonable price. And he was uncovering new technologies that would enable that.
Microwave towers were susceptible to weather issues, and fiber optics really replaced that. We lay them in the ground and they go hundreds and hundreds of miles. Essentially, the communications are coming across the fiber as light. And so we regenerate it and keep moving it across the country and around the world.
Fiber optic wasn't new. It had been around for decades. Nobody put it into a system. Fiber was quick, it was clear, it would give us a competitive advantage. And that's what you look for, especially if you're small and trying to be disruptive in an industry. And I remember the major competitor, AT&T, said, who would ever build a fiber optic network coast to coast?
Through a lot of creativity, a lot of grit and determination, we were able to pull together a huge team of people to take on the challenge.
He had literally taken the company from being tens of millions to billions of dollars in revenue and profit, and it had really built its image as a national leader in telecommunications.
It is an effort, however, for which we all can be proud, and it will make our company stronger in the 80s and well into the 1990s.
Not since Clayson Brown had any CEO of the company used existing technology to create the kind of sea change that Henson put in motion with fiber optics. I mean, he brought the company leaps and bounds ahead of the competition.
That was a company of great wisdom, power, strength, and the ability to grow. And it was all because of his leadership.
How you did things was as important as what you did. And he was very ethical in the way people should conduct themselves, how employees should be treated. He was such a warm person. He lit up a room when he came in. People related to him.
People say that we at United care. Dadgummit, we do care. We care about every one of you.
I do believe he genuinely cared for and took care of his employees. There was a member of my team that was diagnosed with a form of cancer, and it ended up being a similar cancer or a similar disease that maybe Paul had had. And when he heard about that, he reached out to this employee and personally engaged and helped him find a good doctor. He offered his plane so he would fly him to and from treatments at the Mayo Clinic. I don't know much about his business savvy, but what I think of was just his people spirit.
Sprint is known, especially in the Kansas City community, which really does make me proud, as being a company that is very generous. And this idea of giving back and being involved in the community, I think it started with him.
Paul was like a father figure to me. I revered him at the time, and I do today, because he was a marvelous leader, very supportive, great man.
By the mid-1980s, United Telecom was at the forefront of the industry with a much larger fiber optic network than AT&T. But interestingly, at about the same time, about 1983, General Telephone and Electric bought the long-distance switch private telecommunications network known as Sprint.
So I got Sprint. Hi, Mom. Now you're
Brian, dear. It's Brian, honey.
Ask him if he got a job.
Are you okay?
Saving with Sprint. I'm doing fine, Mom.
Then, in 1986, GTE Sprint merged with United Telecom, and the Sprint Corporation was born out of two companies who were expanding their fiber optic networks.
When I was in college, I had Sprint long distance, and we loved Sprint long distance because the billing system was such a wreck. We never got a bill. And so when I joined the company and then understood that we were merging with Sprint, I was like, holy crud, are they going to come and ask me for my money that I never paid in college?
Well, the merger was necessary. We were too small a company to execute on our vision. We needed a partner, financial partner, really. It was part of our bigger, longer-term strategy to enter the long-distance market.
It was the first time that someone could compete with AT&T to send traffic across the country and around the world.
Early 80s, you would pick up a telephone and you knew if it was a long-distance call before anybody said anything. There was like noise on the line versus a local call. It was a new world to us. I mean, advertising on a national level, marketing through TV, it was a whole new level. We learned. We had, I think, some very good advertising agencies that helped us, support us. We came up with, some people may recall, the pin drop. The call is so quiet you can hear a pin drop, because it was.
Little more than a year ago, U.S. Sprint set out to create a long-distance fiber optic network so quiet you could actually hear a pin drop. Now we're creating fiber optic 800 and fiber optic watch services and other exclusive long-distance products. As the saying goes, we've only just begun.
Well, the TV wars that the long-distance carriers got into in the 90s were something to see.
Does your long distance sound bad?
The early telephone long distance commercials for Sprint that I saw on TV, even in high school, they were a fighter brand. They were coming after AT&T. They had very funny commercials, and I loved it that they were taking on kind of the big monopoly in AT&T.
There's something special about a long distance call on US Sprint.
Excellent.
So Sprint decided to focus on humor, on service, on plans that were easy for the customer to understand. And it was at that time that we introduced a very famous face, the Dime Lady.
Hello. I'd like to tell you about the new advertising campaign for Sprint. Why? Well, because I'm in it.
That was very cool that they brought Candace Bergen in. Everybody knew who she was.
And Candace became equally known by her persona on TV as Murphy Brown to our Dime Lady.
I'm a big fan.
Really?
Yeah, I just love your Diamond Minute Rate. I saw it on TV.
Oh, well, actually, that's Sprint's Diamond Minute Rate.
Don't be so modest. It's great.
And the Dime Lady really symbolized that you could make a call from coast to coast, from New York to LA for a pretty decent price. Whereas with the other guys, forget about it, right? So we revolutionized really freeing up communication for the first time in the 90s.
And now I hear you can call all the way to Canada for a dime.
Dime to Canada? That's bigger news than anything you'll find in there.
This? Oh, this isn't mine. Blech.
Over 2 successive periods, we bought out GTE, and then we became the 100% owner of this venture, long distance. And of course, same time, we were beginning to go into wireless.
Well, Sprint entered wireless in the cellular days through a very small company called Centel, and that was sort of your more old school, voice-only car phones. Bill Esri was our CEO at the time, and he had been our CEO for a number of years at that point. He was a very dynamic leader. He had a very strong leadership team that was really taking the company into new directions.
They had created such stability amongst an industry that was so new with so much chaos that it made it a beautiful place to be because we were winning. They had us chartered on a path that was extraordinary. Esri was unbelievable from a Wall Street and financial perspective. All of those things working together made us a juggernaut. It was phenomenal, fast growth, great people, great leadership, and company filled with integrity.
Since Sprint is the only global phone company that offers everything, local, long distance, and cellular, it means with Sprint, no matter where you go, there you are.
About that time in the mid-90s when the PCS spectrum became available and technology had evolved to be able to take advantage of that higher spectrum, we acquired a nationwide footprint and began to build our Sprint PCS network.
Culture is defined by how well its people connect. Introducing the connection for our time, Sprint PCS. The replacement for cellular is here.
Well, PCS stands for Personal Communications Services. It's an all-digital network that not only gives users long distance, but the ability to make a call virtually anywhere at any time. So it really took the cell phone out of cars and put it in the hands of 260 million people.
I've always been fascinated with technology and gadgets. People that know me will say, oh yeah. The idea of wireless phones, it looked like this was going to be awesome, that you could free yourself from a line and talk anywhere, anytime.
What an amazing vision that was at the time. I mean, at the time we were a local exchange carrier, a long distance company, and a Yellow Pages company. If we had not made that investment and that bet on the future, we would look nothing like we look today.
Esri changed the company forever because that bet he made on technology no one else believed in changed the world, still does.
And this was the startup of the wireless industry.
Sprint PCS, the nation's fastest growing wireless provider, operates the largest 100% digital, 100% PCS nationwide wireless network in the United States.
When Sprint entered the PCS business, we were sort of the renegade. We were doing something very different, similar to what we had done with fiber optics for the first time in long distance.
I mean, there was an insane passion for being number one. And when Sprint PCS started, it was number one.
It was a time as an employee that I was super proud to say I worked at Sprint. We were the city's largest employer, and people were proud. At one point, early in the 90s, We had like 50 locations in Kansas City, so you couldn't drive anywhere in the city without seeing the Sprint sign somewhere on some building.
I worked at a lot of different buildings throughout town. I had a car that did not have air conditioning and was too cheap to get it fixed. And so we'd have meetings in the middle of the day, and I'd have to drive in and then allow enough time to stop sweating and go to a meeting.
And I recall part of my job at one point was training, and so I would go from building to building to building and remember submitting expense reports for all the mileage because you'd spend half your day literally driving.
We were a company with sort of like 3 legs to the stool. We had the local division, we had the long distance division, and we had the wireless division or cellular. Rather than have 3 silos in these stools, put them on one campus. And I guess it was largely my concept to make it like a college campus with the parking on the outside, have people integrate together, visit back and forth, walk across to the next building and meet.
So when the idea of this campus came about, it was so cool. And I think, one, just from an employee perspective, we're like, oh, thank goodness we're not driving, all over the city anymore.
The ability to collaborate is phenomenal. Just the ability to go 1, 2 buildings over, meet with your colleagues face to face is fantastic.
And so I would drive past this farmland, and to think, oh my gosh, that's going to be our headquarters, was really, really cool.
The new Sprint campus was dedicated in 1999, and it was very exciting for me, as with a lot of us. I used to actually take my lunchtime to drive down to the new campus, and I'd set myself on a perch overlooking this 300 acres or so, and I saw the cranes and the buildings and everything going on, and I just wondered, where in the 3.9 million square feet of office space would I be sitting?
They had coffee shops, cafes, dry cleaners, that kind of thing. So it was like you didn't even want to leave the campus.
It was amazing, and it was kind of like showing up to college. You feel like you should do everything every day. So I'd eat breakfast and lunch on campus, go to the gym, get my hair cut on campus, go buy flowers on campus. Right out of the gate, there was just a lot of excitement.
The late 1990s were a phenomenal time for the company. They had secured more patents than anyone in the industry, and the stock price was riding high.
I remember at the time when the stock hit $100 and our stock split. I remember I was actually teaching a class at that time, and one of the participants in the class, she said to me, I just was able to retire. What happened with the stock today? I'm done. I'm out of here. I'm a multimillionaire.
When the internet first emerged, the one that Al Gore did not create because we believe that call was made by a couple of Sprint technologists, AOL, which at the time you got mail, could not have been in business without the Sprint network. So the world was really starting to change in technology. Sprint was on the forefront of it, always.
The internet became very publicly available on a computer or a PC in the mid-90s. And it wasn't that long, probably the late 90s, before we were able to do the same thing on our wireless phones. So the rate of change was certainly less than 10 years to move from the PC to the phone.
I can recall, I can't remember the dates, I would go to an airport and I'd say, somebody's using a cell phone over there, look at that. And there'd be maybe 2 or 3. Well, now try to find somebody that's not looking at their cell phone. So the rate of change, the pace of change is remarkable.
I never would have thought it was even possible that one day I would have a small telephone in my hand that I could send a text message or watch a movie or any of that. It was kind of like it would be science fiction.
I remember the phones crackling as, we would take calls and somebody saying someday it's going to be like landline quality. And I was like, there's no way, right? And then what happened was we started getting texts, and I'm like, no one's ever going to text. Like, now more people text than they do anything. Then the next thing came along and they said, we're going to be able to stream data. And I'm like, why would I ever want to use my phone to do what I can do on my computer? And we basically saw the miniaturization of a computer into the handset.
Sprint PCS was really doing very, very well. And it was one of the first all-digital nationwide wireless services. And so it was fantastic and things were going great. And then eventually more competition came into the marketplace. I remember where I was sitting and what I was doing when we realized that Verizon was launching with the Red. And we had spent months working with our attorneys, talking about how we could talk about network reliability. And reliability was a word that was very hard to, justify. It needed a lot of research, a lot of background. And when Verizon came to market and they started talking about the reliability of their network, it just caught on. And you could see that, this was a company that was going to be a big competitor for us.
There were so many things going on that were positive. I mean, Verizon was an up-and-comer now in the wireless business. It was so nice because Sprint PCS was number one, without a doubt. And we had Verizon literally chasing us with the same colors, the same ideas. We had the diamond, they made the check mark. We were fighting mightily. We were winning. Again, for a leader in wireless communication, we were growing like a weed. So bring on Verizon, bring on Singular, didn't really matter. We continued to do innovative things in that business that were revolutionizing wireless.
It's cellular. Sprint PCS. So now their calls will be clear. Ma'am.
Thank you.
They found Brian in Second City, and he just had this unique charm and ability to play this character. And his entire mission was to go around and find people that were having challenges with their wireless service because it was difficult to hear, it was scratchy. And so he was sort of the superhero, if you will, that would swoop in and solve people's problems that they were having with cellular.
I always thought that when I got the job that really Candace was holding down the long distance fort, and I was going to hold down the mobile universe, and that we were like Batman and Robin. I think probably I was Robin.
I got a call from somewhere in this area. Something wasn't right.
One could look at the campaign and say it wasn't just the best in the industry, it could have been the best commercials going for that entire time that it was on the air. I think the thing that I noticed from the outside looking in at Sprint was the collaborative nature and the teamwork aspect of what Sprint did. Everybody wanted to rally behind the campaign. They wanted to be a part of it. They appreciated it. I always felt like I was part of a really giant team that I probably didn't deserve to be a part of, but I felt like I was nonetheless. I absolutely do miss it.
He ended up on People magazine as one of the sexiest spokesmen alive, and we got such a big kick out of that.
I was very embarrassed. I did not know what that was going to mean. But in truth, the next year when I was no longer sexy, that hurt a little bit.
Not long after Verizon came on the scene, taking a page out of our book, they went and they hired a spokesperson.
When Verizon first started doing their ads, I thought, okay, we're playing for keeps now. We're going to have some competition. But I looked at it as a badge of honor because clearly they felt that they had to chase.
But definitely a very similar format where the consistency of the brand, the reliability of the network was always communicated in all their advertising. And so that consistency started to rise to the top.
Verizon, Singular, then AT&T, it became uber competitive in the wireless market.
It's unmistakably a scale game. You have to have scale. It is so capital intensive.
That whole business in the industry has been under very intense pricing pressures.
How do you grow a company when you have no price? Not only do you not have pricing power, your pricing power is being eroded.
So we had an opportunity to perhaps merge or be acquired by a larger company that had been a fast upstart in our business, MCI WorldCom, which was revered as, wow, this fast-growing, unbelievable company that was led by a couple of guys that were so brilliant. How could they be producing such returns?
A proposed merger opportunity between Sprint and MCI WorldCom, which was intended to spur continued growth, fell through. And so the company's stock price took a huge hit.
That merger got blocked. We stayed standalone. He and his fellow colleagues are now in prison. They were operating the business in the wrong way, which was 180 degrees from the way that Esri and LeMay ran the business, which was always above board. Now, we had to retrench and accelerate and double down in data growth, which was emerging.
Explain to us just a little bit about how you're different, where you're going to go from here, and how you're going to get there.
We look like we've seen the bottom and we're turning the corner. We'll be converting our entire network, wireless network, to third generation, which I think is going to give us some extraordinary opportunities.
So in 2002, Sprint decided to focus the business on mobile services with the launch of the first 3G network.
I call 3G really almost like Reese's Cups where peanut butter met chocolate, where the mobile industry and the internet kind of met each other and you begin to have browsers and phones.
The first time I saw a phone that could get on the internet, that was magic. That was something complete science fiction I had in my hands.
Incredible. The wireless internet right here in my hand. News, sports, even Yahoo. Do you think they're ready?
Some are. Others will follow.
Everything that we were doing was first to market.
We were one of the first companies to come out with sports on your phone, which was unheard of. So a lot of groundbreaking, interesting things were happening.
I remember sitting in my boss's office and he said to me, guess what? Our next phone is going to have a camera built into it. And I remember my reaction was, why in the heck would we need a camera on our phone?
I have my fabulous Canon 8-megapixel camera that comes in a huge bag, and I take that everywhere I go. And we would try to explain the benefits of having a camera in the phone, and then it just took off.
See if we can hurry up. I'm hungry.
You are not going to believe what I'm looking at.
Got any gummy bears?
What's ever on the shelf there, Chief?
Can't even tell you.
You don't have to tell her. You can show her. It's PCS Vision from Sprint. They built the largest all PCS enhanced nationwide network. So now your phone can do more than ever.
And now, as we see, our phones have pretty much displaced cameras in our lives.
Things were going along beautifully. And all of a sudden, we received shocking news that Esri and LeMay were stepping down.
I mean, it was shock. It was one of those read about it in the Wall Street Journal kind of things that nobody saw coming, and it was alarming.
This sounds maybe a little dramatic, but it was like having the soul ripped out of people, and it hurt.
But we were convinced it was the right decision for the company, for the employees, for the shareholders.
The next guy to take over as CEO was Gary Forsey. Forsey brought with him an impressive resume of leadership positions. He had also worked for Sprint in the 90s.
It's an exciting time to be a part of the communications industry, and it's a very exciting time to be part of Sprint.
I came back to Sprint in 2003. The industry was changing, and Sprint was really leading at the forefront of that. I think of the people that came from not the Bell system culture and training that a number of us had, but brought in a new perspective that helped kind of light the fire of that energy. They were our differentiator, and we could do that in Kansas City and be very successful.
Because of the increasing challenges of an ever-expanding telecommunications world, it was decided that a merger would be key to expansion and subscriber growth. That led Forsey to begin pursuing a merger with a company called Nextel.
Good morning to Kansas City. Hope you've had a chance to celebrate in the excitement that my new partner, Tim Donahue, and I have announced this morning with the combination of Sprint and Nextel to form a next-generation communications company.
Nextel was very critical for especially blue-collar business and public sector type work in the United States. In fact, we're dominant.
Nextel at that point in time with push-to-talk had a unique set of capabilities that we could bridge to our customers at Sprint over some period of time with technology being put in the CDMA network.
We thought that that would really help us to accelerate and grow and expand our wireless business.
Push-to-talk, Nextel provided a walkie-talkie service. So, in fact, one of our taglines was, hey, you there.
IT. Problem. Try rebooting. Already did. Meeting in minutes. Run utilities. Not good.
When you're out in public places, you constantly heard people's phones chirping.
What's going on? We don't know how many converters we have in stock. We don't know where our trucks are, and no one knows where Mackler is.
6,000 converters. Trucks are at I-4, exit 9. Mackler, where are you?
In the airport.
At the time the merger was announced, I think employees were excited. I mean, excitement comes when you say, gee, we're going to do something different and unique and great, and we made that announcement.
So as we clearly start the transition and start the planning for that, then we got to be sure that we protect our most valuable asset, which is our employees.
And I think at the same time, there's always the change is hard, and it ultimately gets down to what does that mean to me?
At the merger in 2005, it was exciting. We were on a high, but we had two completely different cultures.
I think the Sprint culture was more methodical, and not to bog it down or slow it down, but it was just the way that people knew how to work.
And I want to describe it in the right way because it was great people, but just more bureaucratic, big company, and then you had this scrappy little startup Nextel.
Their tagline was done.
But I think importantly, we saw the future the same way. We saw the future, and we knew that it would be a multi-year journey, but yet one, if you could see through that, then that's where we thought the future would enable us to do that.
We took the Sprint name went first, but we took the Nextel colors, which were black and gold.
One of the reasons that we went with the yellow was because Verizon had so aggressively taken over that red. One of the things that we wanted to do in building that new logo was the heritage that was so prevalent in that pin drop. And the way the pin drops and then fans back up is what creates the new design style behind the fan. September of 2005 was when we launched the new campaign and kind of went to market as one company.
Get ready to have more choice. Sprint and Nextel have come together to provide phones with TV, walkie-talkie, music, and more. Sprint, yes you can.
Because it had been a merger of equals, that really made it difficult.
We decided that we had to do everything in kind of an egalitarian manner.
Roughly 50% of the management team from Nextel, 50% from Sprint, the board 50-50.
We did not necessarily choose the best of both.
I felt, I think, probably better because we were in the acquiring side. Then you kind of go, oh, wait a minute. So if we're all equal, you know, maybe I do have a job, maybe I don't.
But the people that did stay on, we were in for quite a ride.
It was like oil and water when you started to put these people together.
And you also don't know each other yet, so you're still trying to figure out who's the right person to talk to.
Managers didn't know what to say because they didn't know anything either.
And let's be real, you can't have a merger of equals. Somebody has to freaking be in charge.
And it became a Harvard business case that a merger of equals is destined to fail.
And it took years to overcome that.
Well, the synergies between Sprint and Nextel never materialized. The main problem? The networks weren't compatible.
The Nextel network with using the IDEN standard, very low frequencies, Sprint using the CDMA standards at mid-band frequencies, the networks were totally incompatible.
I think the decision was made underestimating how difficult it would be to really sew together two very unique technologies, both financially and technologically. Because I believe we paid around $36 billion for that acquisition.
That's the biggest reason you merge wireless carriers. It's the biggest investment, the biggest expense, is you can go from two networks to one network and take out a lot of cost and simplicity in terms of running the company.
So when you think about the networks not being compatible, when you think about a brand that is confusing in the marketplace, Sprint-Nextel started hemorrhaging customers, which in turn meant lower and lower monthly revenue.
But Gary really wanted the subscriber growth and did not look deep enough to see what the cost and what would come with that was.
It was really tough with the merger. You know, we, no other way to say it, we bought the wrong company. We needed to merge at the time, we bought the wrong company.
While all this was happening, another cloud popped up on the horizon, an exclusive deal between AT&T and Apple Corporation on a device that turned out to be a game changer.
This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone.
Apple put it all together in one very simple package. And of course, what Apple had, he had a fantastic brand. People were standing in line the day the iPhone went for sale. They had never seen one.
They kept talking about how apps were going to change people's lives, and there was going to be an app for a flashlight, and there was going to be an app to order food, and there was going to be an app to make reservations at restaurants. And I remember thinking, this is crazy.
Not offering the iPhone caused damage to Sprint's image and finances. I mean, people wanted the iPhone, including Sprint customers.
The biggest impact wasn't on sales, it was on customers that we already had in the base. So a lot of people left us and defected to go to the shiny new object, and they did that every year when a new product launched. We just see a dramatic spike in churn in the number of customers leaving us.
Before we get into the winners and losers, I have this question for you. Does this deal prove that no carrier in the U.S. market can survive without the iPhone?
After Sprint lost 337,000 customers in a single quarter in 2007, Gary Forsey moved out of the CEO chair and the company brought in Dan Hesse, whose telecom career stretched back to his days as an intern at AT&T.
We needed new leadership. We needed new steering and new guidance.
Yeah, so when I joined the company, I remember it well. I went down to the Sprint hangar here in Kansas City, and I remember signing the contract to start as CEO and being presented with a binder. And I went to the business plan section, and it had us going bankrupt in 6 months. I had already signed before I had any idea. And I said, whoops, Houston, we have a problem.
And it was profound. It was eye-opening to most of the employees of just how bad it was because of the amount of denial that we had because we'd never been in that space.
Sprint eventually wrote off $31 billion related to the Nextel merger.
I brought in a new chief financial officer who became known as Dr. No, because no matter what you were requesting, if it cost anything, the answer was no.
I guess somebody was spending an inordinate amount of money on plastic water bottles. And so there was a mandate, no more plastic water bottles.
And he took away everybody's credit cards, so they couldn't spend. And you had to get approval. I mean, I'm not kidding, to buy pens and paper and pencils and travel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, take pens from the hotel rooms because we can't even afford pens. Oh, yeah.
Kind of funny. Like it was water bottles and literally office supplies we couldn't buy.
If you're really going to do a turnaround with urgency, you have to decide what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and who's going to do it. So when I met people, within the first 2 sentences, they told me whether they were Legacy Sprint or Legacy Nextel. Not that they worked for Sprint-Nextel, but they were Legacy Sprint or Legacy Nextel. I knew that was a problem. And I was telling the employees, I said, you know, don't ever come and tell me that again. You'll be in my doghouse, because we're going to create our own culture at Sprint.
It's interesting because in troubled times, families bond. This company had such history and such loyalty, it was not difficult to get the team to bond together.
And I think one of the best things that Dan did early on is he came in and he said, all right, we're not going to have 2 headquarters. Let's be really clear, Kansas City is our headquarters.
So Dan set the ship straight.
Times were tough, but Sprint was never a company to shy away from a fight. We went to market aggressively with the industry's first unlimited plan.
If you could change the way wireless companies did things, what would you do? I'm Dan Hesse, the new CEO of Sprint. Here's our idea. Use your phone for all the great things it can do without worrying about the meter running. How's that for a wireless revolution? Pretty awesome, huh?
Rate plans were getting complicated again. Now you had a separate charge for texts and then a separate charge for data. So we decided to come up with something really new and different, something really simple. So we came out with Simply Everything.
It was a massive jolt for our company to have something as unique and differentiated as an unlimited plan because nobody else had it yet.
And then our competitors saying, oh, unlimited, schmimited. And then all of a sudden it resonated because it's predictability and that's what businesses want.
But also he had to win back the customer base in America because everybody saw Sprint now as this failure with the Nextel merger and all of the things that were going on.
Only Sprint gives you true unlimited calling, texting, surfing, TV, and navigation on all phones. Why limit yourself?
It was kind of taboo since Lee Iacocca to have your CEO get in front of the camera and make a promise to people that we truly were there for them.
He became the brand, and he put his name and his neck out there and said, when you think of the company, think of me, and I'm committed to doing this thing right. And I think that was different.
He was bringing the trust and belief back in America to Sprint and our brand.
And if you said the word unlimited, you know, it was almost like if you're talking to a shrink, what's the first word that comes to your mind? Sprint. And so the ads, they moved the needle, they moved the brand needle, they moved the sales needle, and we were off to the races. We were taking more customers from AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile than they were taking from us.
Hesse's strategy also included improved customer service, which led to opening retail stores nationwide.
And so I think him really digging into why our customers were dissatisfied and really trying to change our products and services to support that was what he got really, really right.
My weekly operations team meetings, the first thing on every single agenda was the customer experience. So that's why we, I believe, made the dramatic turnaround we did, particularly in the customer experience, how we went in the wireless industry from worst to first in overall customer satisfaction.
We're so confident in the improvements we've made to our network, our phones, our plans, and to customer service that we're offering you this simple guarantee. Join us, and if you're not completely happy with Sprint within 30 days, we'll give you your money back. Pretty simple, huh?
And he struck a deal with Apple to sell the iPhone.
There are over 500,000 apps and counting on the iPhone. Apps that can take you anywhere and do anything. You might say there's no limit to what this amazing device can do. So the question to ask is, why would anyone want to limit the iPhone? We don't. Truly unlimited data for your iPhone, only from Sprint.
Unlimited and simplicity. They were going, perfect. We want them to be engaged, going to the next app, the next app. We never want them to put their iPhone down. And you guys get it. We want our customers on an unlimited plan, and we were the only ones with it.
We were, at the time, planning for our 4G network, and our network is our core product at the end of the day.
Only way that Sprint was ever going to have a great network was to rip out, and this had never been done by any company in the history of this industry, rip out every nut, bolt, and screw in our network in every city across the United States. Everything replaced, brand new.
He also is a tremendous technical mind. So he wanted to get back on the inventive trail and bring us up to really being, again, cutting edge technology that could lead the way in wireless versus being a follower. We decided that we could take 1/3 of our cell sites out of our network. Think about that. Cell sites enable us to make mobile calls and data exchange. 1/3 of the cell sites out and improve our data network with new technology.
And we knew we were going to put our customers through a tough situation for a couple of years as we ripped it all out.
There's going to be times where it's a little bit painful, but I think he did what he needed to do.
Dan had to do it because it was survival. When you think about that now, what do you have to do? Either you lose customers or you reinvest and rebuild. And it costs billions to rebuild the network.
We didn't have any money to build 4G.
It takes a lot of really heavy construction and logistics to build a network.
And you got to be a profitable company to do that. And we weren't generating enough profits to really invest the money to build the network the right way.
We had a balance sheet where we owed so much money. So as hard as we worked to generate cash for the company, and we cut expenses dramatically, but all that money we were saving, where was it going? It was going to the banks to pay for the interest on the debt.
On another front of the battle with AT&T, Sprint was trying to protect its market share by blocking a proposed merger between AT&T and T-Mobile.
We had been talking to T-Mobile about potentially us acquiring T-Mobile. Got a call that AT&T has reached an agreement to buy T-Mobile. I don't know what words I said, but they were not appropriate for this audience, I'm sure.
You know, I understand the emotion of it because much of the move in the month of March with Sprint has been related to its own speculation about a merger with T-Mobile.
AT&T and T-Mobile were 2 and 4 coming together, but the new company would be the new #1, and there would be such a distance between us at Sprint and everyone else. We would have no alternative, no place to go than to be bought by Verizon.
AT&T's $39 billion deal for T-Mobile USA raises some big questions, not least for the companies not involved. Carriers like Sprint, for example, which will, if this purchase is approved, go from third to an even more distant third in the U.S. market.
Everybody believed this was going to be done. This was a slam dunk. AT&T's confidence was demonstrated because they had never lost in Washington, ever. I remember testifying in front of the Senate. I was so relaxed, and could be because I could just tell the truth.
I'm not here to ask for a special break or conditions. I'm here because, like all Americans, Sprint has a stake in the impact this acquisition would have on an industry that has prospered on competition and innovation, the very elements this transaction threatens.
Because I really believe that would have created a duopoly in this country, made it very clear that we're not saying there should be 4 carriers. It actually is probably better off with 3, just not that merger.
Sprint was on the rise, and so was its stock price. In Japan, a guy named Masayoshi Son, who founded SoftBank, saw Sprint's success as an opportunity to enter the American market. And so he bought a 70% interest in Sprint.
Last week it was rumor, this week it is fact. SoftBank, a Japanese wireless company most of us have never heard of before, is buying up the lion's share of our community's biggest private employer, Sprint, based in Overland Park, in a deal worth $20 billion.
And at that particular time, Masa-san, he was in the mobile business, having the exclusive on Apple in Japan, which was remarkable. He was doing great things in Asia, and obviously wanted a piece of conquering America. And if anybody could do it, it was this guy.
We used to say Masa was the Sprint's best network engineer for a while because Masa is obviously brilliant. And he really got in and he understood what was wrong with our network and what it would take to fix it.
What the SoftBank investment allowed us to do was go buy Clearwire, because that was the 4G spectrum, which, we owned half of Clearwire, but we didn't control Clearwire, and we needed to be in control of that. And the SoftBank investment let us buy Clearwire and then have control over our 4G destiny.
That became this oceanfront property that's going to enable the future of wireless. We have more of that than anyone else. It's coveted. Masa had the foresight, insight to want a piece of that and saw Sprint as a way. We took a lot of costs out of the business. We needed to return to growth because one thing about Masa-san, it's all about growth.
Hesse did what had to be done. He shut down the Nextel network, and he focused resources on rebuilding Sprint.
It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my wireless career because we actually had to lose customers a quarter because we wanted to turn that network off. It cost more to run it and keep the lights on, this 2G network, than we were getting from the customers.
It really was a tech issue. There was no way to combine the networks without just purely telling the customer, you have to switch your behavior. They weren't ready to just drop that service and move to Sprint, where you had to make a phone call or send a text message.
You have had to spend a lot of money to build out the network. The last time we talked, you said, look, I don't know. There's got so much has to be done. Worried about drop calls, worried about the changeover. How far along are you? And are you satisfied with the quality of your network yet?
Well, no, we're not satisfied yet. We'll be about 2/3 of the way finished by the middle of the year, but the important thing, by the middle of the year, we'll be finished with the complete rip and replace of the old Sprint network.
Walking across the campus and walking around the lunchroom and talking to the employees was an important part of what I wanted to do, every day. We went through difficult times, but they were great times, and it just means so much to me.
Dan Hesse had done what he came to do, position Sprint for the future. With the network build-out well underway, he decided it was time to retire. Among SoftBank's other acquisitions was a success story telecom startup called Brightstar. It was founded by an energetic, charismatic guy named Marcelo Claure.
Sprint was really struggling. Morale was low, and at some point, you started to feel like there was a definition of insanity setting in. We were continuing to do the same thing over and over, expecting a different outcome, and that different outcome wasn't happening.
Well, Masa-san decided to shake things up at Sprint by putting Marcelo in charge of Sprint.
Developing this midday, we are learning more about the man taking over at Sprint.
They are confirming that Marcelo Claure is going to be the new president and CEO of Sprint.
What you're seeing is a new phase in the strategy going forward, and with that comes new leadership.
So when Marcelo came in, it was like, holy shit. Right? And this guy was an entrepreneur, he's a billionaire, so he clearly does not have to work. So he's here for a reason.
In terms of someone having such charisma, such brilliance, to have that combo, it was like, wow, here's a guy that's gonna lead us to the promised land.
It was like a force of nature came in, and it was almost like, one building at a time, turning over the furniture and saying, we're going to change this up and we're going to turn this company around.
Sprint was a company that was in trouble in every single aspect. But it was a company that was in denial in the trouble that it was. Everybody tells you, he says, don't make any decision for the first 100 days. Learn, observe. And then I said, yeah, but we're getting killed in the market. We're losing, 10, 20, 30,000 customers a day. So we need to massively change the way we do business. And people call me and say, you're out of your mind. I said, this is mission impossible. And I really didn't think it that way until I sat down with my CFO and I said, how much money did we lose last year? They said, we lost $5 billion. I said, well, that must have been a terrible year. He said, yeah. I said, well, how much have we lost the last 5 years? I said, we've lost $25 billion. I said, well, then we've been going at it real bad. And they say, yep, Sprint hasn't made money in the last 11 years.
He just implemented a plan, like we're going to invest in the network and we're going to fix our IT systems that have been outdated and broken forever and a day. We are going to change our marketing, what is appealing to the consumers.
So I said, I have a really good idea. I said, why don't we go city by city? I'm sure for $100, a good meal and a good drink, we'll get people to want to talk to us.
I'm going to tell you a carrier name, and I want you to basically tell me what comes to your mind. When I say Sprint, be very honest.
The pin drop is the only thing that I can think of. The old commercial with the pin dropping, that's the first thing.
Inconsistent and trying to catch up rather than doing something different.
Yeah, unreliable coverage. Unreliable coverage.
He very quickly kind of cut through all the mess and said, look, your network doesn't work, you don't have any kind of cool differentiated handsets or anything that differentiates you, and you're way too expensive.
The odds were totally against me. You don't even have any money. So I was incredibly transparent with Sprint employees, and we told them I have to let go of 5,000 people. Straight up. I said, I'm not going to lie to you. This is the only way that we're going to be able to reduce cost.
Wireless carrier Sprint said on Sunday it aims to slash fiscal 2016 expenses by as much as $2.5 billion through layoffs and a wide array of cost controls.
He said it was a, and I quote, transitional quarter. And then he said, we often hear this when we're being mindful, a transformational journey. And I want to know to where?
Marcelo hit the ground running. He had to make changes, which included some reductions in costs and the employee force, but he reached out to consumers like never before.
We invited people from every other carrier to come to Sprint. They would bring us their bill. We would look at what they were paying for their rate plan and cut it in half. And I mean, that was bold. And that was Marcelo saying, hey, I have to do something big. And Masa saying, you know, absolutely, go do whatever you need to do.
What's the monthly rate?
85.
About 160? What if Sprint could cut your rate plan in half?
I would love to cut that in half.
People started coming to Sprint in swarms to get those deals, those commitments, those offers.
That day was the day of something special. Our sales started to go fast. And it was the beginning, I would say, of a very different type of relationship with my employees.
He has a drive to not only excel personally, but I truly believe it's to show others in what is possible.
He would ask us to do things that, frankly, it might have taken us months to do those things, and he wanted it done in 2 days. And we did it in 2 days.
And Marcelo really did an outstanding job of forcing us out of our comfort level and really trying to not have barriers around our decision process.
And our first promotion was a day later, where I told IT, I said, this is what I want to do. IT said, no way. It takes 90 days to change. I said, how about 90 minutes? I said, it doesn't have to be perfect.
He doesn't take no for an answer, and it was all about speed to market and being aggressive and competing.
And the crazy hours that we would work, like board meetings would be at 11 p.m. His time was so crunched that we'd get on a board call. If it wasn't done in 20 minutes, he'd hang the phone up. But the one thing that I respected the most about him was he was very customer focused.
Marcelo didn't just change the way we work, he insisted on changing our workspaces. We went from these old school tight cubicles to open workspaces where people actually interacted with one another.
Then the first week, it was taking the physical doors down within the executive suites on campus. It was about getting to the people through a town hall. It was ensuring that we were communicating to our teams all the way to the front lines where the work really gets done and customers are taken care of.
What you started to see is you started winning in the marketplace. And who doesn't want to be a part of a winning team? And people that are fighters like me and others, you want to freaking win. And so we started to see the momentum. And when you start seeing the momentum, you get your swagger back.
That was the spirit that he started to bring back that really got people to dig deep.
And so that's when he said, I think you need a signature program. You need something that everybody can rally behind.
Today is a very important day for the future of Sprint and for the future of many people in this country. I made a commitment to all of you that you are always going to hear it from me ahead of time. Later on today, we're going to be making a huge announcement. We're going to be briefing the President of the United States, President Obama, on our new 1 million project initiative.
Major corporations, including Sprint, and Marcelo is here today, they have committed to making sure that 1 million young people in underserved communities who don't have internet at home are going to have digital access and broadband and the ability to plug in.
Helping to erase the digital divide.
Imagine if we can become the only country in the world that every single home is connected. That changes the US forever, because every single one of our kids will have the same access to the internet. It really doesn't matter if you're rich or if you're poor. And I have no doubt that as my competitors see how we're changing the world and changing kids' lives, that they're going to join me in this, and that they're also going to help me bridge the digital divide in the US.
It has been a great time to be a wireless customer in the U.S. It has been a more difficult time to be a wireless CEO. The FCC calls what's happening in the wireless market competition. Equity analysts call it a price war.
We were doing very aggressive, exciting, crazy, crazy things.
And I think a lot of us thought Marcel was a little crazy, but it was fun. You know, we worked our tails off during those times, but it felt good.
Not all of his moves worked, but I loved what he always said. You got to try, but then fail fast. So when we did fail fast, we failed fast, but some of the big things still to this day live on in a big way.
You announced today that you're done with contracts.
An American consumer will know what they're paying for a phone and what they're paying for service.
Let's give credit where credit's due. I think Marcelo Claure is doing some great things. I said this before. He's swinging the bat. He's in there. I don't know if these things will work, but they're innovative, and he's trying them.
What can I do for you?
All I want is something unlimited and the phone that I want. All in for one price.
Sure. Anything for you, David Beckham.
Oh, and I want it for all my friends.
Okay.
Okay, then.
We were trying to figure out our new campaign. We need something huge. We need something different.
So I said, find me the most famous people in the world, people that if you see them in TV, you're going to pay attention to them. And they show me Oprah, and they show me Britney Spears, Ellen DeGeneres, and they kept on passing. And then suddenly I see this picture of this guy. I said, oh my God, it's the Verizon Can You Hear Me guy now. And I said, go find this guy. You don't want to meet this guy.
I called him one day and I told him who I was. And I said, we want to send you a phone. And we just want you to use it. And he used it for a couple of weeks, and he called us back, and he said, I love it.
So I said, I want to have dinner with him, flying over, and he flew over.
Our first meeting, I was actually invited to his house to have dinner with his family. And that in and of itself was unusual because in my entire experience as a commercial actor, I had never crossed the threshold into an executive's home. He asked me what I wanted to get out of this job. And I said, if I'm going to come out of retirement from making commercials, I want to do something bigger than I've ever done before.
So we sign him on the spot, and then every attorney shows up and says, you can't do that because they have created a persona. I said, they might own that persona, but they don't own Paul Macchiarelli.
It was really important to me that we used my real name, and it was really important to me that I'm a real customer. I wanted to be sure if I was using my name, I was telling the truth.
And we say, this is it. I said, I have a good feeling. This is going to change Sprint forever.
We all knew that there was something amazing about using Paul, but when we launched the campaign, magic happened.
Hey, I'm Paul, and I used to ask if you could hear me now with Verizon. Not anymore. I'm with Sprint now, because guess what? It's 2016, and every network is great. In fact, Sprint's reliability is now within 1% of Verizon. And Sprint saves you 50% on most Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile rates. So I switched to Sprint, and millions more have too. Can you hear that?
I was home alone when the commercial launched.
And I remember it was NBA Game 2, and I'm so nervous to see, and I see the ad.
I'm not a sports fan, so I actually didn't know it was happening, and my phone literally exploded.
And the following day, our sales exploded.
This is a direct attack on Verizon. I mean, right? But this is a John Lesher tactic.
I want to hear about where he's spending his money, though. I want to understand this.
The new Can You Hear Me guy now from...
Yes, that's a great ad, by the way.
And I love it. He ends with, can you hear that?
There you go.
Loud and clear, right?
It was the first time ever that a carrier actually wins the campaign of the year for all industries, and we started winning prizes, and Paul was on fire.
And when the all-new iPhone 10 changed the game, he knew it deserved to be on a game-changing network with unlimited that could support all of its awesomeness. Sprint.
Can I just change one more thing?
Better?
Works for me.
It was fun. It felt like I was working with my friends, and it was kind of nuts.
I think it showed first how bold we were. It showed that we were really serious about our network. It gave us legitimacy to talk about it. It also gave us honesty and transparency.
The stock went from $2.18 to $9.30 a share, which is amazing. It's incredible.
We deliver the best financial result in Sprint's 120-year-old history. We made money again, true net income money.
For the first time in 11 years, the company was net income positive, which was amazing.
We were way behind the competition in 2014, but by late 2017, we were beating Verizon and AT&T. It was unbelievable.
Sprint shares soaring double digits. The company reporting its highest sub growth for the first quarter in 9 years.
It was quite a good number, very unexpected. And Sprint, I think, has been involved in what I regard as a great civil war against T-Mobile.
Your analysts and investors saying that this year you're going to overtake Sprint.
I actually said very subtly and gently, we already passed them. But I've been kind of gracious. You know, I'm not really one to brag.
I do like John, and I think he's doing a really good job, and he's proven a lot of people wrong. As he relates to his network numbers, we definitely use different mathematics.
Marcelo reduced expenses by more than $6 billion while improving our products and services. So our brand was revitalized. And instead of losing millions of customers, we gained in customers.
Making a change in a company this size is monumental, and it takes years. And that's what he did, and that's the culture he instilled in all of us.
Marcelo did a fabulous job of coming in, reinvigorating, helping people dig deep and say, I want to win.
We're no longer a going concern business. We're no longer a business that people thought we were going to go out of business. You know, we stopped sucking. And then that was the time when we say, okay, now we are a mergeable entity. I called John Legere and I said, look, this merger has been tried many times. I said, but this is very different. The time to merge is now, to basically create what is going to be, no doubt, the most iconic telecommunications company in the world.
Hey everybody, I'm back. You know what these videos mean. It means I have big news to share.
Actually, this time we have big news to share. Things started to look good. We're making money, we were adding customers, and I think Masa was incredibly impressed. He basically says, I have another request from you.
And today was a very important day for us because Masa invited me to be part of the SoftBank board of directors. And that's something that I think comes at the most exciting time in the history of SoftBank.
Marcelo moved from CEO to executive chairman of Sprint in order to focus on the merger, knowing this would be the most contested merger in Sprint's history. I mean, it's gone through 3 congressional hearings, and Marcelo was there fighting on the front lines every step of the way.
First thing that I want to tell you, and just so my successor doesn't get too happy, you know, I'm not leaving. I'm going to change focus. So the next CEO of Sprint is Michel. I want Michel to stand up and welcome him as he's going to be our new CEO.
I have known Marcelo for many years. I didn't really know the Midwest. Marcelo told me, oh, come and join me in Kansas City, which is called the Paris of the Plains. So I joined because I was excited by the journey. I joined because I was excited to work with Marcelo. I joined because I was excited to join a company such as Sprint. But when I joined, I have been immediately impressed with this passion of, let's say, my Sprint crew. I love it.
The transition was pretty easy because Marcelo's still around. He got it to a point where he had to go on and move to figure out this merger.
The beautiful thing about this merger is we both need each other because we're both subscale. AT&T and Verizon, they take 93% of the profit of the industry. So now we create a third viable competitor the size of an AT&T that's going to allow us to, for the first time, be able to fight with 2 hands and not with 1 hand behind our backs for both companies. We're going to go build the world's best 5G network. We're going to have the best products and services. We're going to lower prices to consumers, and we're going to create jobs. That is the poster child of what every single merger should look like.
It's pretty breathtaking. Verizon and AT&T and Comcast and the others better watch out.
Because we are coming.
The 5th generation of wireless networks, or 5G, isn't about a smarter and faster smartphone. It's really about taking crazily increased speed and low latency or lag time and applying it to applications like augmented reality and virtual reality and connected cars and smart cities and smart homes. All these things will benefit And really, it shines where machines need immediate and consistent communication with each other.
Would you ever think of a doctor being able to do a remote surgery with someone somewhere else, like in a rural hospital as an example, and they're literally real time working on that individual with technology? That's really not possible today. It would be possible with 5G.
You know, 5G is going to change the world in ways that we can't imagine.
We were the first to launch 5G in the US. We were the one to disrupt the industry altogether. If you want to remain competitive in this industry, you need to innovate.
What Sprint is doing right now with 5G, the markets that we've launched, our ability to publish a map and show people, here's what it is and here's where it's available.
True mobile 5G, it's not fixed. So you've got the devices, you can move around in and out of buildings, in and out of a city. That's what's so exciting. And I want to be a part of that journey, and I think most of Sprint employees do.
Without Sprint, probably US would not be where we stand today from a 5G perspective.
I am really, really proud, and I am really, really excited. So thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. And let's really embrace mobile 5G in the US.
It's going to take years for people to get new phones and the technologies to really, iron themselves out, but it will be phenomenal.
And I do believe the merger between Sprint and T-Mobile is in the public interest because of the frequencies that both companies hold combined, give an opportunity to create the best network in this country and perhaps one of the best networks in the world.
We have unbelievably talented people, but most importantly, we can't lose the 5G race to China or Korea or to anyone else. We need to lead that race, and to make that happen, these two companies have to come together.
This company is about growth, so when you bring better products, better prices, more jobs, this is a poster child. This is how every merger should look like.
The only company that can build the world's best 5G network is a combination of Sprint and T-Mobile. And we can only do this if this merger is approved. Today, we can build the world's most advanced, covering every corner in America in urban, suburban, and rural areas.
It's very well known how it's been going through different challenges, and we have been able to get the approval from FCC, from the DOJ, and now we have this last step, which is going through this potential trial, right, with the states. My expectation is that this merger can be completed and that this new company is going to have the scale and the reach to develop the best network in the country.
The merger has the potential to create thousands of new jobs by building out the next generation 5G network and by opening hundreds of new stores in rural areas.
But will those synergies result in lost jobs then?
As we say, the jobs in this company will be greater on day one and every day thereafter than the two standalone companies. And I would also say when I make that statement, that's more jobs than the standalone plans of two very aggressive standalone plans.
Ideally, in a few years, this new company should be the reference and be the gold standard for networking.
Yes, it will be different, but it was different when we merged with Nextel. And, you go through those culture shifts. I think the beauty of looking at this merger on the horizon is the companies are much more similar than what was before, and we made it through last time. And so I feel like this is an opportunity, if this happens, to really do it the right way.
You have the world's leading university that says the worst merger in history, and that was the Sprint-Nextel merger. We need to erase that from Sprint's past. That the new next company CEOs that go to Harvard, hopefully they're going to read the best merger ever in telecom history, and that's going to be the Sprint and T-Mobile merger.
Everybody loves a good underdog, and then you love to see them recover. Who doesn't love that? And wait till this merger. If this happens, oh my gosh, it will be a new era.
We got some breaking news. As Becky said right before the break, it is now official, a federal judge approving the merger between T-Mobile and Sprint.
This has been a long time coming. T-Mobile, which is the third largest U.S. wireless carrier, has been waiting almost 2 years.
The testimony was that Sprint might fail. And if Sprint failed, then you'd have three, but not three capitalized. This is very powerful and very good for the consumer, believe it or not.
Shares of both Sprint and T-Mobile skyrocketing today after the judge rules that the deal does not violate antitrust laws.
From a network perspective, irrespective of pricing, there's no argument at all that this will be the strongest network that Verizon and AT&T have ever competed against.
people look back at Sprint, I hope they say, you know, that was a 100-year-old company that was a tremendous innovator. We were always first with camera phones, first with new network initiatives.
And so much of what the industry is in this country.
Without that, who knows where mobile would be and wireless.
I think people who work here love this company.
I didn't know whether I was working or whether I was playing. I enjoyed it so much.
Sprint family is really special. They are so passionate. They are so committed. They are so dedicated to their company. It's a family.
Sprint people never give up and always win under any circumstance.
A hard-working group of people who never gave up.
In the good times, we all work together, and in the challenging times, we work harder together.
A lot of times people will say, wow, the Sprint employees have been through so much, and they bleed yellow. And I think that's true.
Some of my very best friends in life are people that I met at work.
So many of my very best friends used to work for Sprint and still do work at Sprint.
Names don't mean anything. Sprint wasn't Sprint when we started. Sprint was the Brown Telephone Company. Then it moved to United Telephone Company. And then we bought some licenses that we decided to name Sprint PCS. You know, we're not losing our identity. The heart, the essence, the soul of what we are will remain for many more years. It is the people. What makes Sprint so great, it is basically our people.
I know it sounds cliche, but I've been here 25 years. It is definitely the people.
The people, the good times, the fun times, the hard times.
The legacy of Sprint, for me, is very straightforward. It is the people.
And what I love about Sprint and why I'm still here is because of the people.
Many times when you say, what is it about this company? People will say, people.
The people.
The people. The people. And I hope people remember that.